Thank you, Program Director. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. As indicated, we from the Health and Welfare SETA, one of the 21 SETAs who have to deal with health and welfare-related issues. In my presentation, as I have to share with you what is happening within the health sector, I will also touch the social services, which is the welfare, because there is no way in terms of implementation you can divorce health from social services. They are intertwined. And also, I assume that also I'm preaching to the converted, because I think the health sciences and the welfare services have taken a leading role in implementing the workplace integrated learning. So as a health and welfare SETA having to do with NQF level 1 up to level 5, we have to adapt because we don't have to fix it if it ain't broken. But let me start with a definition. I know maybe yesterday I was not here, you were bored with definition, but there are key or strategic words in the definition of work integrated learning. It's a purposeful, organize, supervise, and assess educational activity that integrates the theoretical learning with its application in the workplace. So it is a purposeful, organize, supervise, assess. It means it is planned, it doesn't occur by default, or it is not an afterthought in the health sciences and the welfare sciences. You don't have to apply theory and then later on decide where are you going to place the learners for workplace learning. It's supposed to be purposeful. When you take when you take your input, you register your learners. The number of workplaces should be commensurate to the number of learners we are registering. So this work integrated learning can occur as a work practice through placement in an industry, professional or community organization workplace. As you know that in the welfare and the health sector, we deal also with NGOs, non-governmental organizations, so we use their premises as workplaces. So placement can happen in the workplace, which is the industry, professional, and organizational workplace. As work practical through placement is stimulated workplace practice setting on or off campus, even a practice setting on and off campus, as you know that sometimes we use simulation rooms, but in-term simulation facilities, but I will explain later on in my presentation. So this, through an assessment activity, are designed to simulate an authentic workplace activity. Work integrated learning supports students learning through, maybe let me look at this. Work integrated learning supports students through the application of academic theory in related workplace practice and the development of skills and refinement of attitudes learned in academic context through experience in work integrated learning environments. So as a health and welfare SETA having to deal with NQF level 1 to 5, we've adopted this. All our programs, 70% is practical, 30% is theory. We have to adapt, even though in other instances we are using simulation facilities, but a simulation facility does not represent the actual workplace. A simulation facility is used to prepare as students. You must understand that the health sciences and the welfare sciences, there are no oops. If you can't put a drip, we cannot risk putting a drip on anyone. We have to ensure that you are able to do it in a simulation facility before you can do it in the workplace. Therefore, this is different from the other fields in a sense that we have to ensure that there's no room or margin for error. So taking into cognizance of the social work studies, placement occurs annually from second year and is embedded in the curriculum. It is embedded in the curriculum that when the students register, they are already prepared to go to the workplaces. The workplaces have been identified, validated to ensure that placements do happen. In the health sciences, as I've said, we use simulation and labs for actual placement as part of the curricula throughout the studies. One of the examples, like for instance in veterinary sciences or when we train animal health technicians, which fall within the ambit of health. When I'm referring to health, I'm not only referring to human health, also as well as animal health. That also the anti-cruelty league doesn't allow us to do practicals with actual animals. And we know that when coming to human, we use cadavers, which are real bodies, when we're training doctors. So that when they go to the workplace, to the hospitals, they already know what is a vein. They've seen it from the cadaver. Unfortunately, with animals, an animal cannot be prepared to be used as such. So we have to use models there because we are not allowed to use live animals to do that. So both a simulation or lab experience complement the workplaces as part of the work integrated learning. The simulation facilities have to resemble the actual workplace. You have to mimic the actual workplace. This is augmented by practical experience in the workplace, as I've already indicated. Combination of both approaches ensure the reduction in the margin of error. As I've said, there are no oops in these fields. You cannot make mistakes because of you can be sued. One of the challenges is that also when coming to workplace integrated learning, would you allow yourself to be pricked through a needle by somebody you know very well they are not learning? If it's not structured, they are not supervised and so forth. So they are trained in these labs so that they know where to identify the vein so that the margin of error is reduced. So also practical experience also commences on the second year. As we know that in social services, it takes 4 years to train a social worker. It takes 2 years to train a social auxiliary worker. A social auxiliary worker, most of them are trained by the training is registered by the SETA through the QCTO. So in that model, 70% is practical, 30% is theory. So when coming to medical practitioners, your doctors, they do a 2 years medical internship prior to graduating, which they are exposed to 12 facets in their field. So they are exposed to 12 facets within a period of 2 years. They can go to surgery, so that they are fully grounded. They know everything as far as a human being is concerned. The same model also is used with animal health in the veterinary sciences. So also even nurses, also this, I know this is a contagious one. We believe that nurses have to be trained in a ward, not in a university. So in terms of integrating workplace experience and theory. But if we are training nurses at a university level, we are moving away from the paradigm shift. It's a paradigm shift from the model of the health sciences. Nurses have to be trained in the ward. That is why even nursing colleges are situated in the hospitals themselves. So we use the following principles are embedded in the workplace integrated learning throughout the health and social services sector. Workplace integrated learning is embedded in the curricula. As I've said, it demands proper planning, which ensures that we validate the sites. From the health and welfare sector perspective, we do register sites. Not every hospital can train a good doctor. There are academic hospitals, as you know. Even with facilities, we identify facilities which meet certain standards, and then we do accredit them to be used as sites for practical purposes. So there is, we call it a workplace validation. As a SETA, we have a policy which we use to identify you ticking the boxes whether you have all these things available. Because in the first place, if for example, a medical student who's trained in a hospital, perhaps a rural hospital, they do not do surgery, is not going to be to be exposed to certain facets within the period of 2 years. Even with our lower levels in terms of health sciences, we mimic the same model. We ensure that your ducks are in a row in the workplace to be able to meaningfully impart knowledge and experience on the learner. So the number of intake at institution must tally with the available spaces in the workplaces. We do have also a formula which we use in terms of a number of learners to a coach and or a mentor in terms of the ratio. If you have, for example, we are implementing one of our learnerships, you have only 2 employees. You can't be taking a huge number because of who will be supervising those students. As I've said, it's a volatile environment whereby you are dealing with human lives. You cannot take a chance, therefore there must be supervision. So the policy, there are guidelines and a policy which dictates as to what you need to put in place in order to can implement this. So workplaces are validated and accredited as teaching sites. Proper planning in terms of supervision and mentorship. There is formal agreement between the learning institution and the workplace because of things do change. When you are accredited, we accredit you, the workplace, there's a work site validation as a teaching site, given the fact that you meet certain requirements. So there is an agreement that those requirements will remain in place for education not to be compromised. So as a sectoral approach, I've indicated the sector has been leading in the WIL approach, even though we did not call it work integrated learning, but it has been embedded in the curriculum. It has been done for years. As a health and welfare sector, we just had to adapt to that. So in terms of the learnership model, we follow the approach as indicated, 70% practical, 30% theory. It means all our learners who are doing social auxiliary, who are doing other health sciences which are not offered at the university level have to do 30% theory and 70% practical. This indicates that learning happens in the workplace, not in the classroom per se, because of when you compare the 30% and the 70%. So there is another example, a different model which is followed at the pharmacy. Everything happens in the workplace in this one. They train 100% in the workplace. Is workplace integrated learning in the true sense of the word. So each and every constituency in the sector has a critical role to play. When coming to graduates, placement of university or University of Technology graduate with employers is in the health and social development sector. Placement of TVET colleges graduates with employment in the health and social development sector. This is, I'm mentioning what we are doing with the TVET colleges because of now is a new thing. We haven't ventured into that before. And now we're beginning also to accredit TVET colleges to offer some of our programs, which is a challenge. You find that the relationship between TVET colleges and the industry has not been solidified. After intake, you find that the students cannot graduate because of they haven't fulfilled the 70% of the practical. So it is something which needs to be corrected, which we are trying to correct, that actually the workplace should be identified. If you haven't identified workplaces, enough workplaces, don't take more students. And also because of the workplaces actually are becoming scarce because of everybody is scrambling towards the same workplaces. Maybe even we need to redefine what is a workplace. I'm thinking aloud there that somebody who's studying tourism, my house can be a workplace. as long as there are certain things which have been put in place, like you need to have a fire extinguisher, you need to have this and this, because of, it doesn't mean even the employers, other employers, big employers, meet all the requirements. But unfortunately, because of we are dealing with human lives, we are very strict. Because of there are others, you find that these are big corporates, these are big private sector institutions, they are refusing to comply and say, we've been dealing with this, we've been doing this for the past 20 years. Things have changed, we need compliance, because of also there's an issue around insurance of those students when they are dealing with human lives. Should somebody pass on, who's to be blamed? So there's quite a lot of, critical and sensitive issues. So we can't afford to cut the corners. So in terms of implementing WIL, we need the following partners. It is the learner, the employer, HWSETA, and the training institution. It can be a university of technology, or it can be a TVET college. But all the four have to come to the party in order to do this. So there are roles and responsibilities discharged for each and every one. The employer has to undertake the administration of WIL agreements. I know sometimes it is a challenge because of they say, you know what, we don't want to do this paperwork, we want to help, but we don't want the paperwork. So as a health and welfare sector, we've come up with a different model in terms of supporting. If you have cooperatives of skills development facilitators who go there and assist them with administration work. Because of if you have no administration, there's no way the administration or paperwork done. There's no way the learning institution is going to demonstrate that that requirement has been met. So there's quarterly reporting to the HWSETA and the institution. There's issue of allocation of mentors, supervisors to each learner. As I've said, we're dealing with sensitive issue. A learner needs to always be supervised. So the employer have to provide experience related to the learner's qualification, record any assessment done at the workplace, inculcate a culture and ethos of work. It's not about teaching them how to deliver, to discharge their mandate in terms of health sciences issues, or medical issues or social services issues, but also the ethos of work, the culture. We know we are dealing with a different generation. We do not understand our children. They walk with their pants on their knees, yet they don't fall. Yes, as parents, we pay for the full haircut. They cut half, yet you still pay the full price. So you are dealing with a different generation. So we need that ethos, that culture of work to be inculcated as well so that they are ready for work. So the learner has a responsibility in terms of attendance and adherence to the rules of the employer and in terms of completion of the tasks. So as I've said, it is goal-directed. There is a schedule or task or objectives which needs to be met. So it is up to the learner to ensure that they do that. When coming to the training institution, the training institution needs to engage with industry partners to build that relationship with industry, support the allocation of work-integrated learning opportunities, as universities have done in the past. Now they've identified hospitals which they call academic hospitals. And also, even with the social services, we have identified workplaces within the NGOs, that's your old age home, early childhood development centers, whereby these social workers can go and discharge their mandate. But also, we would want also, as I'm saying, we would want to look even into venturing into schools and police stations because there's a need for such services there. So the training institution has to provide adequate preparation, a briefing, training resources for the workplace employer. As I've indicated, simulation rooms and labs are used to mimic the actual workplace so that the learner is ready when they go to the workplace. I'm using the word learner because of in terms of our mandates as sitters, we're talking of learners, students when they are at a university, but they are all, I'll use it for lack of a better word. Implement and maintain a management system to provide course, unit and placement information to students and work placement providers. It is always ideal for a student, as soon as they register on the second year, they know where they'll be placed. Because of if this is not properly arranged, even in terms of we're dealing with needy students, sometimes you find that is a challenge. They don't have money to travel from the university to the workplace. But if it's properly arranged and everything is known beforehand, you know, the logistical arrangements are taken into cognizance. So the training institution has to allocate, monitor, and track students' work integrated learning placement, implement monitoring and evaluation plan or process to evaluate work integrated learning placement arrangements and outcomes. They are not there to buy lunch for the council of the elderly. They are there to do what they are supposed to be doing. So the training institution is there to implement quality assurance processes. And then in terms of the findings, we did as a health and welfare sitter, Amusi Kumbuso Tabashe is the executive responsible for research. We did try to get also a sense from the employer's perspectives and then also from the student's perspective in order to try and enhance and improve on what we're doing. So most of the employers said we bring very raw people and they need time to grow them, mold them in terms of conduct in the workplace. Because of conduct, they tend to overshadow everything. You know, the attitude can make or break you. You don't know whether they are able to do the actual job. You are dealing with conduct. I must say as well, in a South African context, it is quite difficult. It's quite a challenge because of everything is seen in terms of color. You can reprimand my child for wrongdoing just because of you are from a different race. He will not see it as wrongdoing, he's seen as racism, and everything tends to overshadow and cloud everything. So it is quite a challenge which has been raised in terms of conduct, instill a sense of responsibility through talking on issues such as late coming, sick leave, and respect. Because of their students, the way they behave in the institution, that's the way they want to behave in the workplace, particularly if they are in a group. And you find that for the employers there who are supposed to supervise them, is foreign. They are not used to such behavior. It is a challenge which they have identified because of diversity in our past. So, but from the students' perspective, they did not raise other issues. What they raise is that the workplace is quite scary in a sense of human sizes because of there is no room for mistakes. One of the issues which we are trying to explore, we've seen it with some of the few service providers, that before they go on workplace integrated learning, they get an insurance for the learners through a union in order to cover them. Because of should something happen or somebody is treating your granny there, even if they are 102, is their time to go. But I know it's difficult to accept. You would want to sue if you know that maybe the injection was administered by a student, but they are under supervision. It means the person who will be taking responsibility, it is the supervisor. That is why the supervisor have to instill a type of conduct and attitude on the student, and the student fail to understand. that actually I'm going to be accountable for the good and the bad you are going to do here. So it is something which we need to preach to our students. So when coming to the challenges, this is my last slide, there is also lack of monitoring and evaluation by employers, especially where learners are placed at different sites in the case of learnerships. You find that learners are in different sites. We do have what we called in the health and welfare sector a host employer. You find that you are galvanizing other employers to use their sites, but you are coordinating because of they are not interested in supervision. They can do supervision. They are not interested in writing reports and signing agreements and so forth. You find that the challenge is that there is lack of proper monitoring in different sites. People tend to focus on one side only. But it is a challenge because of now we want to take as many students as possible. We need extra workplaces, but if there are these challenges, you find that it's not supervised. But as I've indicated in terms of our guidelines, even if you are taking you are a host employer, you are taking various sites, we do go to them to inspect and validate if they meet the requirements. But as I've said, one of the challenges, we can come and say, this is a health-related qualification. Do you have somebody, maybe is under psychology, do you have a registered psychologist to supervise the learner? Yes, when we check. But 2 months down the line, it's no more. And then when we do the final assessment, we find that the learner was actually supervised by somebody who's not qualified. But on our papers, we have somebody different. So those are the challenges we are encountering. And you find that even if you replace the person, you haven't informed us. In terms of paperwork, we're expecting so and so with these qualifications, which are in line with what the student needs in order to graduate, only to find that is not the case. So there are ethical issues which might compromise quality. I think on the issue of the ethical issues, one thing which we have identified, as government, sometimes you become a victim of your own success. If we issue many bursaries, you find that there are those takers who are not a material for health sciences and social services. I mean, I usually say our professions are not the issue of the mind, the issue of the heart, issues of the heart. You can get all A's, straight A's in matric. It doesn't mean you'll make a good doctor. So it means even when coming, we do not have an instrument in terms of even the intake at university. We look at also the academic qualifications. We look at the matric results. And also, even though you might have an instrument, you might find that a person can fool you because of they want to access a bursary. But after they've been trained, it becomes a challenge. One of the challenges in terms of workplace integrated learning, which is a plus, we're able to identify who's who in the sector. When you take them you take your learners for workplace integrated learning, maybe at a laboratory, somebody who's doing phlebotomy will come and say, oh, I can't stand blood. Why did you choose this course in the first place? Because we work with blood. If you can't stand blood, you don't need to be here. If it's in a veterinary science, you send them to the animal health hospital. From Africans, when we see a snake, we kill it. That's how we're raised. So there, you find a snake, you need to nurse it to health. No, I can't stand a snake. Because it doesn't mean in an animal hospital you've got all types of animals. So, but from this is also the issue that we can't fix a moving train. We need to go back to the basic education level. That's where at primary level we need to influence life orientation programs so that we identify people who will make it in this industry and so forth. Because of is money down the drain. Because of some of these learners, you can't force them to go and do workplace integrated learning in an animal health hospital where there's a snake. So they, there will be sorts of things and they'll be dropping out. And then when they drop out, is money down the drain. The money should have been used for someone else who can be able to stomach what is available there. So those are the issues we're having. And also the issue around lecturers not having industry experience. When coming to the TVET colleges, venturing into health sciences. Maybe we're loading the TVET colleges too much. We need to think about it. That you find that there's no experience, industry experience. Hence, we try to fix a moving train. We have this grant for workplace experience for lecturers, that you go and expose yourself in the workplace as well. And then we give a grant for that, an incentive for them to be able to experience. Because if you send your learners there, they are going to experience something which you haven't experienced. So we're trying to cover all the bases. And also we realize that there's no constant engagements on latest developments. Things are moving too fast. You find that in hospitals, they are buying new machinery, the way of doing things and so forth is no longer the conventional way, but the institution is teaching on the conventional way. When you go to the workplace, you find that it's a totally different ball game altogether. I used to tell people that at a very young age, I was trained as a teacher. Our lecturer used to say, when a child does this, you do this. When I went for teaching in a high school level, I found that child they taught me about is nowhere to be found. The one who was there, I couldn't manage them. Therefore, I quit because of, yes, it's a totally different child altogether who I can't manage. So even in this field, you find that we teach in an institution, we have all those equipment which belongs to the museum, but when they go to the hospital, they find something different. When they find something different, so it means there must be that engagement between the industry and the learning institution, that we are procuring this is so that actually they know they are able to adapt their curriculum and prepare the learners what they are going to meet. Hence, this will lead, if it's not properly managed, it leads to dropouts. Once people on the second year, they go for the first time in the workplace, they decide, this is not for me. It looks as if we are setting our learners up for failure. So I've already touched on the issue of misguided career guidance. Employers need to get involved. Employers need to get involved, a partnership with the SETA, with a basic education department. That actually I don't have to go and stand in front of a class and tell them, in order to be a nurse, you need this and this. I must call a nurse to come and say it. Actually, they must be taken, their projects in life orientation, their case studies must be linked to this. They must be sent to the clinic, go and observe and write a report. Go and ask questions so that they are able to make the right decisions. I think with us as well in the health sciences is the issue around choice of subject, which channels use. You find that the good ones actually who have a heart for this type of work, they've chosen the wrong subjects. We have to live with those who get A in everything, only to find that their heart is not in the health sciences or social services. So I'm saying in closing that learners' conduct in the workplace is a societal problem. Our learners behave the way we behave. When we are not happy about service delivery protests, mark my word, they are going to do the same if they are not happy in the workplace. Never mind that they are not employed full-time, but they are there to learn. They are going to bend tires in there. So it's a societal problem. It might sound as a joke, but it's worrisome because of when they demolish things, they are unruly. Sometimes we ask why. They've learned from the best. They've seen us doing that as parents. So how we portray ourselves as members of a society, we are sending a wrong message because of these are the types of behavior we get in those workplaces. Mind you, the supervisors, mentors in the workplace, sometimes they are not incentivized for carrying this extra workload. So if they have to put up with unruly behavior, therefore, they can decide that, no, we're no longer going to do it. And then what will happen? Because of our programs cannot happen without practical. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mban. That was Ms. Mban she is the CEO from the Health and Welfare Center. Now, to respond to what Ms. Mban has just said, we'd like to call upon Dr. Jeanette du Plessis from CUT, who is going to respond to the speaker. Thank you.
My presentation, the title is The Use of New Technologies in the Delivery of Work-Integrated Learning. And maybe I should just give you a little bit background. This research was in health sciences, but specifically in radiography training. I'm working as a lecturer at the Central University of Technology for the past 16 years in the training of radiographers. And before that, I was employed as a radiographer in clinical practice for 18 years. So during that time in clinical practice, I also mentored the students during their work placement. When I got engaged with the teaching and learning at the university, I realized that there's a big underlying thing that we have not yet discovered about the whole issue of work-integrated learning. So as the years go on, you know how it goes at university. They urge you on to engage in further studies, and I ended up doing my PhD in the area of work-integrated learning in radiography training. I decided that first of all I had to find out what is the current state of work-integrated learning in our profession. So I first did a survey at all the universities. The intention was to develop a learning program for work-integrated learning. What I also discovered is that I've now opened a can of worms, because this is a pedagogy with lots of facets. It's not only one thing, it's not one person who can manage that. It is a whole thing. It's a monster, actually, if you don't do it correct. So just a short presentation today. I think around about 2003 at the Central University of Technology, they dumped this term work-integrated learning on us. They say this is now what we are going to call it. Previously it was called experiential learning or internship. It's still being called that in many places. But they said to us, you now change it to work-integrated learning. That was the end of the story. They never informed us what exactly it means. They never said to us, is it anything different from experiential learning? Does it have more facets? Should you do it only at the workplace? How should you assess it? Nothing. It's like maybe things are going in South Africa almost the same as with outcomes-based education. Now we do outcomes-based, there you go. Right, so a misconception, only one of the things that I discovered was that people have adopted the term work-integrated learning with little or actually almost no change in the way they do work-integrated learning. And the big misconception is that WIL is not only about workplace learning. Now, I stood outside the door, so I heard the presentation of the previous speaker, who talked a lot about what is happening in the workplace. And I think all of us with students in workplaces know all the challenges. During the investigation, I also discovered that there are lots of other challenges to be addressed, like preparation of the students prior to placement, training of the mentors where they are placed, because this is a huge area where development is still needed. Now, I just want to show you some of the results from my study. This question to the people at the universities concerned with work-integrated learning in health sciences or radiography education were asked to what extent they use other types of, I call it their curricular modalities, but you can also call it a learning mode, of which we know the one on your right-hand side, the workplace learning. This is what we think, or many people think, work-integrated learning is all about. Okay? So this is what I found, is that the radiographers, they use workplace learning still as the main learning mode to teach radiography or to send their students to get experience in. And the others that you see here, work-directed theoretical learning. This is teaching in the classroom about that specific aspect. Problem-based learning, scenario-based learning, and project-based learning. They use it to some extent, but they don't use it a lot. Right, this is just a breakdown. Here at the bottom you can see all the types of methods you can use to teach in the different learning modes. Okay, so there are lots of ways that we can teach people as part of work-integrated learning. Okay, this is for problem-based learning. Okay, there's a lot of ways that you can teach. And you can see there that some are used more, but some are still used not very much. Right, for project-based learning, the clinical practice projects, of course, are still the preferred method to use to teach in WIL. Okay, and then the workplace learning, of course, and work-based learning, of course, are still topping the list of ways to teach in WIL. Right there, I've just made a summary of some of the teaching methods that you can use to teach in the WIL environment under the different learning modes. And I got this from international literature. I also research lots of methods to implement that. Now this is, if you tell somebody to try and use this, it is sometimes really earth-shaking. But my message is you cannot do all of that at once. But you can try to implement one or two of those during a year in one of your class groups. Then you're already on the way of changing your practice. Right. Also for assessment, I asked them about lots of assessment methods used to assess students in the WIL environment. And I have not mentioned them on this slide, but on the next slide. Why I did that is because people still believe that practicals, when students are in practice or in the workplace, are the top of the mountain, but there are actually lots of other ways to assess the student. And I've just listed them there. This is also from international literature, all the assessment methods that you can link to the assessment of students in the WIL environment. Now, I'm sure it looks quite daunting to some of you, because if you look, for instance, at, I think the most common ones is portfolios, writing a test, doing an OSCA, we call it an OSCA, It's an objective simulated clinical assessment, but there are many others. Now again, you don't have to do it all at once. If you take one of those, implement it in one of your year groups according to the level, then you are on your way of changing practice. Right, so what we did at the Central University, and I'm just sharing our experiences, I don't say everyone can do it. It depends on the resources. We started with our new qualification in radiography, a Bachelor of Radiography, 4-year qualification in 2014, and we implement this new work-integrated learning program. And we decided we will have to make use more of other learning modes than workplace learning. So we're now teaching our first-year students at the university only. We don't place them anymore as in the past. And we used electronic interfaces. I'm sure you know E22. It's also called Blackboard, Moodle, and that. So what we do is we place a lot of information on our electronic interface, and we make our students in our skills lab interact with these. So usually on that interface they get a total complete learning unit with all the information, slideshows, learning activities, and of course image libraries. This is just an example, but it takes quite some time to compile all these and to make it available to your students in an electronic environment. Right, we also do assessment in our skills lab using these electronic devices, and now they can engage much more with how they are going to see the images while they are in clinical practice. Right, we also purchased a software package which they call Ziltron. So the students can, at the university, not in the workplace, at the university practice how to do and how to interpret the images. Right, this is a very nice program or software package that we also purchased. I call it virtual radiography. Now, virtual, we all know, is in a simulated environment where students then can practice at the university. So the only disadvantage, I think, is this is quite expensive on campus, but it is unpredictable to teach a student in the hospital environment because you can never guess what is going to happen next. We can teach multiple students now at once. It's efficient and rewarding, and the students are making mistakes. They learn by their own mistakes, and they can correct their own mistakes. Right. So I think in the health sciences, the practicing of what they have to do on real patients is becoming a huge ethical issue. And I can promise you, when I engage with literature abroad, it is much more of an issue. In Africa, not so much. I think maybe patients are still a little bit uninformed. But overseas, you cannot practice on a real patient if you are a student anymore, and never without supervision. If you go to our health environment, you will be astounded at what is sometimes happening. This is just some images of the virtual classroom or the virtual package that you can teach in for the WIL environment. So they can actually position their virtual patient on the X-ray table. There's the part, they are going to do this patient's ankle. Right, there's the ankle. So they did everything like they should have in the clinical environment. They also get some other scientific information. This is just some more images, and you can see they engage with their mistakes and they find solutions. Right? This is just our X-ray machine connected to this virtual imaging environment where they can practice make mistakes, correct, discuss it amongst each other, right? And then we also purchased a mobile phone application where they can access the virtual environment and the e-learning platform from their mobile phones. There you see one of the students. Right, so in conclusion, I think the message that we should take with us is that we should go away a little bit from the notion that WIL can only be facilitated using workplace learning. You can prepare your student a lot better to be placed in the workplace by using learning modes at the university. But I promise you it takes some effort and you have to make the mind shift to get there. Right, also assessments can be done using other stuff than practicals. Students can practice over and over till they get it right in the virtual environment. Formative feedback on the spot. Okay, students placed for workplace learning are much more confident and prepared to work with their patients. Right, and that is my story. What I maybe can just say is we also nowadays interact with the medical students, the physiotherapists, the nurses in an interprofessional teaching environment where we use these simulation labs quite a lot. So then we use scenarios where the radiographer, the doctors or the medical students, the physiotherapists, the nurses, everybody is involved, and that also introduced them in a work-integrated learning scenario to what is going to happen in the workplace. Thank you.
The University of Johannesburg. Rethink, reinvent.